All right, we are back for another special short little episode here this week. I would like to apologize in advance for my sniffling, my coughing. If I have to sneeze here or there, I have come down with a cold. I've been sick since Monday. Thankfully, as I just learned from moments ago, it is not COVID. It is just the common cold. But let's welcome back to the show, Mr. Early Birthday Boy. Tomorrow will be turning 23, Mr. Jack MacArthur.
I appreciate it. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, Jackson. Really looking forward to talking about some sports and to help you out with this assignment. Let's get right into it.
All right, Jack, there's one thing you won't be able to hear it, but I want to play this for you first. This is what we're going to start with.
Start the party, Los Angeles! Your Dodgers have won the World Series!
That was Joe Davis on the call for Fox as the Los Angeles Dodgers win their second World Series title in 36 years because, of course, nobody counts that asterisk in 2020. They defeated the New York Yankees in 5 games and an incredible comeback in Game 5 on Wednesday night, Jack, as the Yankees, they had a 4-1 lead, and then that top of the fifth just pretty much ended their season.
Yeah, crazy work from the Dodgers. They were pretty consistent all series long. I really thought they were going to go for the sweep, and they ended up dropping Game 4. They lost that game badly. I still can't get over that Mookie Betts fan interference moment. That was pretty wild to watch that. For those of you who didn't see it, the two Yankees fans that tried to yank the ball out of pry it out of Mookie Betts' glove, and he was pissed about it, rightfully so. And those two fans got kicked out. And there were rumors that they came back for Game 6 Game 5, because that was during Game 4, I believe. But yeah, no, nevertheless, crazy moment there.
Also, those two fans, they were high school friends with Rob Gronkowski, and how crazy was that when that news dropped?
Yeah, I honestly couldn't believe it. All the comments were saying it makes sense because Rob Gronkowski, is not a class act, and everyone was roasting him. But yeah, that is a pretty wild moment. I've seen some pretty crazy, fan moments like Malice at the Palace, a bunch of, crazy stuff that's gone down in sports history. But that's probably got to be top 5, craziest moments to see, like a Yankees fan actually try to like twist off his glove. Like he could have broken his wrist or he could have sprained his wrist. That would have been even worse. But I'm glad that Mookie was all right. And shout out to the Dodgers. They made a comeback, as you mentioned, in Game 6. Game 5. Easy for me to say. They won the series in 5. And you know what? You got to give your flowers to Freddie Freeman. He had that walk-off grand slam in Game 1 just to kick off the series on the right foot for the Dodgers, and he played a phenomenal series. Walker Buehler stepped up. He did well. The Dodgers bullpen was great. And, as you mentioned, their second World Series in about 30-something years. But, hey, that's 2 rings in 5 years. So I'm a big Dodgers guy. So
now, Jack,
it was an entertaining series, nevertheless.
I want to ask you this question because, of course, the Dodgers, they acquire Shohei Ohtani, who, has been phenomenal this year.
Right.
And most people would argue that he's the best player in baseball. But he didn't have a home run the entire World Series, but he still did contribute a little bit. Is this the best Dodgers team that you've seen by far?
I think it is the best Dodgers team I've seen by far. I mean, a couple of years back when the Dodgers had Scherzer and a couple other really good closers and pitchers, it was, pretty lethal because when Kershaw was healthy a few years ago, he was still doing his thing. But now that Kershaw is close to retirement and he's getting older, I mean, maybe he'll come back for a year or two. He's near the end of his career. But this has to be the most stacked Dodgers team I've seen, since I've been alive. I mean, even though Shohei Ohtani played subpar in that series, as you mentioned, he still contributed. I was shocked by Freddie Freeman really stepping up. I mean, he's 34 years old. I mean, the guy's, not super young, but he can still hit tanks. And you got to give credit to Freeman. He had a great series, really stepped up. And listening to that Joe Davis call for that walk-off was a pretty unreal moment. I mean, it was a great call, a great homer. I mean, nobody's ever hit a walk-off grand slam in the history of MLB, so it's a pretty historic moment to say the least.
Now, I'll ask this question real quick because, of course, a lot of people are giving Joe Davis a lot of flack because, he spends the season with the Dodgers on Sportsnet Los Angeles. But this is the third time him and Smoltz have been paired for the World Series. Do you miss Joe Buck?
I don't miss Joe Buck. I mean, it's funny because some people like Joe Buck, but I think he's not. I don't think that Joe Buck is that bad of a broadcaster. I just prefer him calling NFL over MLB because whenever Joe Buck's calling the NFL, I enjoy his calls a lot more. And I'll never forget believe it was, if I'm not mistaken, Saints against Vikings when Stephon Diggs had that touchdown when he was like, Diggs sideline touchdown, and that was just like one of the best calls I've ever heard.
The Minneapolis Miracle.
Yeah. I think that Joe Buck is a great football broadcaster, but baseball, I don't prefer him. I like hearing Joe Davis. He's got a good voice, good rhythm, good tonality, and he really did pay homage to Vin Scully in that, Gibby meet Freddie, because, Gibson hit that homer years ago for the Dodgers, and it was a very eerily similar walk-off.
Yeah, they were both injured. They were both hit at 8:37 p.m. local time. That was something I saw.
I didn't hear that.
That was crazy. That part of it. Yeah, it was at the exact same time.
The only comparison that I really heard was, the call comparison, because Vince Scully said, she's gone. And then Joe Davis said the same thing. But he said, Gibby meet Freddie. And, Freeman walks it off or whatever he said. But, yeah, I thought it was a great series. I really thought it was going to go to 6 or 7 games. Aaron Judge struggled a lot. It's crazy to see how much he struck out.
One thing I'll mention real quick here is because, of the move, Joe Buck and Troy Aikman going to ESPN for Monday Night Football, I always maybe had a hunch that Joe Buck, with his baseball expertise and his history, he would move to the radio side because ESPN Radio has all the pitches in the playoffs. They have broadcast rights to every game, including the World Series. But frankly, ever since Shulman stepped down 2 years ago, John Shambi has done a great job taking his place. I enjoyed listening to his call too. By the way, if you haven't listened to John Shambi's call of the final out, here it is.
The 1-2. Swing and a miss. And the Dodgers are World Series champions. They storm out of the dugout third base side and mob Walker Buehler. The Dodgers have won it all.
So that was a very fascinating call because I always like listening to the radio because they have to be a little bit more descriptive. I was streaming the radio on my phone and watching the Fox stream on my computer. But another interesting broadcast element, Jack, that has been in the news recently is the news yesterday that dropped that Bob Costas has retired from baseball. Of course, he was one of the voices for the American or the divisional series on TBS, depending on what that was for the last few years. But of course, Brian Anderson, the number one guy at TBS. But now with Bob Costas gone, they still have rights to the series next year. I'm assuming Don Orsillo or Alex Faust will probably be taking the place of Bob Costas, but just a lot of people had problems with Bob Costas, and it was something my dad and I were kind of going back and forth about. I don't know if it was just the pressure from the critics that didn't like the calls that Costas was making, and it eventually just led him to quote unquote retire from calling baseball.
Yeah, it's definitely super intriguing news. That is pretty shocking to me. I mean, he's, if I'm not mistaken, in his early 70s. I think that he probably could have continued to call baseball for at least another 5 years or a few years if he wanted to. But nevertheless, he's had a good broadcasting career. I think a lot of people just think he's very biased.
He's 72.
Yeah, 72, yeah. So I think that, he still's got some good years ahead of him, and if he decides to broadcast other sports or does, studio anchoring. But I do think that he caught a lot of shade, and everyone was hating on him for just being biased. So I think that was the biggest issue people had with him. But overall, I thought that, I think he's a pretty good broadcaster. All
right, Jack, let's switch gears here. Try to keep this episode short. Saturday, we got some college football. One of the big games tomorrow afternoon is, of course, the Oregon Ducks trying to continue their unbeaten streak as they go to Ann Arbor to the Big House to take on the Michigan Wolverines. They are a 14.5-point favorite. They have won the last 2 meetings against Michigan, but they are still 2-3 all time, dating back to the last matchup that was in Ann Arbor on September 8th of 2007, in which they won 39-7. In fact, one of my dad's friends was at that game, has a bag of M&Ms that has the date and the final score written on it, and my dad still has that bag of M&Ms unopened on his office table. So Ducks go to Michigan. Of course, Michigan is not the strong team that they were last year to make that national championship run. But Jack, I just want to get your prediction. Do the Ducks cover? Is this a close game, or does Michigan upset them?
Well, I got to say Oregon's going to win this game, but it will not be by a ton. They're not going to blow them out. They're on the road. They're in the big house. It'll be a really tough game for them to play. It'll be extremely noisy. I think that the Ducks will win by 17. I think that they cover, but just barely. I say they win this one by 17 or 21. I'll say the final score will be Ducks 38, Michigan 21. I say Oregon wins by 17. I think that they could win by more than that, but it just depends on if their run game excels like it's done in past games. Oregon's, it seems like they've seemingly improved every week. They're getting other running backs involved. It's not just Jordan James or Whittington. They got other guys involved. Whittington had 2 touchdowns last week in their win. So I think that it'll be a great game, but I got Oregon by 17. What's your prediction, Jackson?
I knew you were going to ask that. Well, my friends have kind of called me out here because I predict an upset every week over Oregon, and like I told them, I'm just going to keep doing it until it happens. So I'm going to take Michigan here. Michigan wins this game. Do I think it's going to be high scoring? I don't really think so. I think both these defenses have a lot to say in this matchup. Of course, what did you say, 48-21 or something?
I said 38-21.
38-21. I don't necessarily think it's going to be that high. I'm going to go Michigan 24-20. I'm going to say Ducks lead 20-17 with about 2 minutes left. Michigan drives down the field in the final 2 minutes. They score the go-ahead touchdown. They hold off Oregon. They improve their record and give the Ducks their first loss. But of course, that will likely be wrong, as Oregon is favored by 14.5. So the odds makers must love them in some ways, but that should be a very interesting game, Jack.
Yeah, it should be a great game. I think that it's going to be a challenge for the Ducks, playing on the road, especially in environments like the Big House in Ann Arbor, Michigan. It's going to be a big test, but I think that Oregon is up for the challenge. The Ducks are undefeated this season, number 1 ranked team in the country right now. They're a 14.5-point favorite for a reason. I think that Jordan James is going to have a big game. I know he's been dealing with some sort of injuries, so Whittington has stepped it up a little bit, but I'll say Oregon wins this one by 17.
Oregon and Michigan will kick off at 12:30 on CBS, and of course Westwood one as well. 2 other games to note here on the Saturday slate. At 12:30 you have Florida taking on Georgia, and then at 4:30 you have the college football primetime ABC game between the Texas A&M Aggies and South Carolina Gamecocks. Any of those games stick out to you, Jack?
I think that the Texas A&M and the South Carolina one should be extremely interesting. Texas A&M should be favored, though, right?
Texas A&M is at South Carolina. I'll have to check on the odds for that one here in just a second. I believe the spread here is actually going to be Texas A&M minus 3.5.
Okay, I say Texas A&M covers. I'll say they win this one by 7. It'll be a close ball game. But Texas A&M, they've been solid this season. I know that they're climbing the rankings. If I'm not mistaken, what are they, 15th seed right now, or I could be wrong?
Texas A&M currently right now is number 10.
Number 10, yeah. They've climbed the rankings. They only have, 2 losses this season, or how many now?
They have 1 loss. They're 7-1.
Yeah, 1 loss. Yeah, I say they win this game. Texas A&M has shocked a lot of people this year. They've been doing pretty well.
That 1 loss, by the way, that 1 loss was to Notre Dame.
Right, Notre Dame, they've been all right this year. I think that Texas A&M wins that game with a final score of, I think it'll be a defensive battle, but it won't be as high scoring as the Oregon-Michigan game. I'll say Texas A&M gets a dub 23-17. What do you think the final score will be, Jackson?
I think it's going to be close too. I'm going to take Texas A&M. I'm going to say 31-28. I'm going to say it's a field goal at the very end. It's going to be an interesting game. One more game I want to talk about, Jack. This is not ABC primetime. This is the big noon game as the number 2 and number 3 seed, the number 3 and the number 4 seed will clash at 9 a.m. In Happy Valley as number 3 Penn State 7-0 hosts 6-1 Ohio State. Of course, that one is looked at as a very important game for the Buckeyes because they do have that one loss to Oregon. Penn State is still unbeaten. Penn State and Oregon do not play this season unless it happens to be in the Big Ten Championship. So this feels like a must-win game for Ohio State.
I agree. Ohio State, they only have one loss this season, correct?
They have one loss, yes, the Oregon
game. And it's
game.
to Oregon, 33-32. I think, as everyone knows, I do think that this game is
Wasn't it 32-31?
I could be wrong. I think it was 32-31, though. Could be wrong. You could fact check me on that one. But, I do think that it'll be a great game. Penn State's been electric this season. Their offense is really good. I'll say Penn State takes the cake on this game, and they end up winning by 10. I think that the spread's going to be not too far off from like -3.5. What is it? What's Penn State favored by?
Ohio State's actually a 3-point favorite in this game.
Really? Ohio State's a 3-point favorite. I'm not really too impressed with the way that Ohio State played against Oregon. I mean, everyone was talking about how Ohio State's going to crush the Ducks. It was close. I'll just say this first of all. If Jordan Burch was playing in that game, Oregon probably would have won by more. And if their offense, if their run game was, more consistent, I think that, Ohio State, their offense wasn't that good against Oregon. So I think that Penn State wins by 10 and shocks people. I think that the Big Ten Championship will be Oregon against Penn State. Also, the final score, it's going to be pretty high scoring just because don't have a lot of faith in the Ohio State defense. So I'll say Penn State wins this one 34-24. They take the cake. Who do you got winning this game, Jackson?
I'm going to take Ohio State. I think the Buckeyes are going to get back on a roll here. They are a favorite. They need this game to stay alive for a Big Ten championship berth and a good seeding in the college football playoff. I mean, even if they lose this game, Ohio State should probably still make the playoff as, even if they're a 2-loss non-conference champion because, the playoff expands to 12 teams. So, of course, looking at those 2 losses, if you lose to the 2 teams that end up meeting the Big Ten championship game, that's still a good-looking resume. So I think Ohio State, they need this game, and they're going to get it done. It's an early kickoff in Happy Valley, but, Columbus is not too far off. I think Ohio State wins this game 35-31. I'm going to say they win by 4. They barely cover. They improve to 8-1, and who knows? Maybe Michigan beats Oregon, and all of a sudden we see a 1-loss Ohio State and a 1-loss Oregon, and that could be up for grabs in the Big Ten championship game. You would also have a 1-loss Penn State, so everything would be up for grabs. There's so many tiebreaker scenarios, but this is a get back game for the Buckeyes, and I think they're going to be able to pass the test.
Yeah, last thing I'll say about this game is it'll be a close one, but I got Penn State.
All right, real quick before we end, Jack, I just want to ask, last Sunday we had a game in the NFL between Chicago and Washington. Of course, it was the breakout game for the rookies, Caleb Williams against Jaden Daniels. And in case you missed that, it literally came down to the final play when Jaden Daniels just hailed the ball towards the end zone. It was tipped up and then caught by Noah Brown for the game-winning touchdown with no time on the clock. And I was shocked because I was watching that live and my jaw just dropped. I'm like, did they seriously just convert that Hail Mary? But what was your reaction to that final play?
Yeah, I didn't get to watch it live, but I saw it on SportsCenter later, and Scott Van Pelt broke it down. Pretty wild sequence. I mean, as you mentioned, the Bears, they were leading for that, for majority of that game. They ended up choking at the end. And, shout out to Jaden Daniels. And you got to give credit to my guy Mariota. He stepped up a few games ago when Daniels was injured. But, nevertheless, 52-yard bomb, a Hail Mary from Daniels. And as you mentioned, Brown caught it in the end zone. I mean, if you're the Bears, there's not much you can do defensively when you got a guy like Jaden Daniels. I mean, the dude's got a cannon of an arm, and you got to give credit to Washington. I think that it was a great win for them, and that really inspired them and gave them some motivation and some confidence going forward. In my opinion, it was a great game.
All right, Jack, that should conclude this short little episode. Stay here for a second because I have another thing to discuss with you. But thanks for joining us this week, and we will be back. So, Jack MacArthur, once again, we thank you for joining the program.
All right. I appreciate you having me on, Jackson.